Take the house, Jenna. Take the paltry alimony. Just sign the damn papers so I can move on with my life." Anthony slid the pen across the cold mahogany table, his voice a low, lethal drawl devoid of any remaining affection. Jenna didn't flinch. She didn't beg. She simply picked up the heavy Mont Blanc pen, the gold nib catching the harsh fluorescent light of the boardroom, and signed her name with elegant, deliberate strokes. "You're making a mistake," Harold, his seasoned lawyer, whispered, unnerved by her total, suffocating silence. "No," Jenna replied, her voice as smooth and unyielding as glass. "I'm just getting started." Despite the relentless, bone-deep chill pumping through the vents of Stanton, Hayes and Kensington's penthouse suite, a solitary drop of perspiration glided down Anthony Caldwell's perfectly manicured temple. Outside the panoramic glass, Miami baked under a tyrannical, cloudless sky, the arid heat turning the waters of Biscayne Bay into a blinding mirror of white light. It was a suffocating, drought-like afternoon, but the true asphyxiation was occurring within these soundproofed mahogany walls, where a decade of matrimony was being clinically executed in less than 60 minutes. Anthony adjusted his Tom Ford silk tie, his leg bouncing with a nervous energy he couldn't quite mask. Across the vast expanse of the polished mahogany table sat Jenna, his wife, soon to be ex-wife. She was draped in a simple, understated beige sheath dress, her blonde hair pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. She wore no makeup, save for a sheer gloss, and her hands rested calmly in her lap. She looked entirely untethered, floating above the wreckage of their life with an eerie serenity that was beginning to claw at the edges of Anthony's fragile ego. He had prepared for a war. He had spent the last 3 weeks bracing for the inevitable explosion. When he had finally confessed to the affair with Lindsay, a 26-year-old social media influencer who cared more about her ring light angles than the complexities of Anthony's real estate empire, he had expected tears. He had expected Jenna to throw the antique Lalique vases they had bought in Paris. He had expected her to hire a shark of a lawyer who would bleed his accounts dry and drag his name through the mud. He needed her to fight him. He needed her rage to justify his betrayal, to prove to himself that their marriage was a toxic battlefield he was right to flee. Instead, Jenna had simply blinked, calmly poured her Earl Grey tea down the sink, and said, "Have your lawyer draw up the papers." And now, here they were. Harold Stanton, a silver-haired bulldog of a divorce attorney whose hourly rate could finance a small country, cleared his throat. The sound echoed uncomfortably in the silent room. Harold had orchestrated some of the most vicious, high-profile divorces in the state, dismantling the fortunes of men like the notoriously private hedge fund manager Marcus van der Wyck and the Atherton family heirs. Harold was used to shouting matches. He was used to bargaining. He was not used to an opposing party who showed up without legal representation, reviewed a brutally one-sided settlement offer, and simply nodded. "Mrs. Caldwell," Harold began, his voice taking on a patronizing, overly gentle tone, as if speaking to a child who didn't understand the rules of the game. "I feel it is my ethical duty to reiterate that by signing this document, you are waiving your right to contest the division of assets in the future. You are accepting a lump sum of $500,000, the deed to the secondary condo in Brickell, and waiving all claims to Caldwell Holdings and its subsidiary properties." Anthony leaned forward, unable to help himself. "It's a generous offer, Jenna. You know it is. Most guys wouldn't leave you with the Brickell place. You can start over. Open that little bakery you were always talking about." Jenna's eyes, a pale, icy blue, shifted from the document to Anthony. There was no hatred in her gaze. There was no sorrow. There was only a profound, hollow emptiness that made Anthony's stomach twist. It was the look one might give a stranger who had accidentally bumped into them on the street. Mild annoyance, quickly forgotten. "I am aware of the terms, Harold," Jenna said softly, her voice carrying a melodic cadence that commanded the room. She didn't look back at the lawyer. She kept her eyes locked on Anthony. 500,000, the condo, and Anthony assumes 100% of the equity, liability, and operational control of Caldwell Holdings. "Correct," Harold said, shifting uncomfortably in his leather chair. He shot a quick, covert glance at Anthony. Harold was a creature of instinct, and his instincts were currently screaming that something was terribly wrong. In his 30 years of practice, an unrepresented spouse surrendering a claim to a $40 million commercial real estate portfolio without demanding a forensic accounting audit was unheard of. It defied human nature. Anthony's phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a message from Lindsay. "Babe, are you done yet? The lighting at the marina is perfect right now for the engagement announcement post. Hurry up!" Jenna's eyes briefly flicked to the illuminated screen, then back to Anthony. A microscopic, almost imperceptible smile ghosted across her lips. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a smile that sent a sudden, irrational shiver down Anthony's spine, despite the freezing air conditioning. "Take the house, Jenna," Anthony said, his voice dropping, trying to reclaim the dominance in the room. "Take the paltry alimony. Just sign the damn papers so I can move on with my life." He slid his heavy Mont Blanc pen across the table. It spun slowly, coming to rest precisely in front of her. Jenna didn't hesitate. She picked up the pen. The gold nib caught the harsh overhead light. She flipped to the last page of the thick stack of legalese. "You're making a mistake," Harold whispered, leaning in, unable to suppress his professional paranoia. "If there is something you are relying on, Mrs. Caldwell, an outside promise, I must advise you." "No," Jenna replied, her voice smooth and absolute. She pressed the pen to the paper. "I'm just getting started." With elegant, deliberate strokes, she signed her name. Jenna Marie Caldwell. She signed the initials on the previous pages. Then, she placed the pen down, aligned the papers perfectly with the edge of the table, and stood up. She smoothed the skirt of her dress, picked up her modest leather tote bag, and looked at the two men. "Congratulations, Anthony," she said, her tone utterly devoid of sarcasm. "You got exactly what you asked for. All of it." She turned and walked out of the boardroom. The heavy glass door clicked shut behind her, sealing the room in silence. Anthony let out a long, shaky breath, slumping back in his chair. "Well," he muttered, trying to force a triumphant smirk. "That was easy?" Harold didn't smile. He stared at the signed documents, as if they were a live explosive device. He reached out and touched the fresh ink. "I don't like it," the old lawyer murmured, his brow furrowed in deep concern. "I don't like it one bit, Anthony. The lamb doesn't just walk into the slaughterhouse and hand the butcher the knife, not unless the lamb knows the butcher is standing on a trap door." "You're overthinking it, Harold," Anthony scoffed, grabbing his phone to text Lindsay. "Done. I'm free. See you at the club." "She's weak. She's always been weak. She just didn't have the stomach for a fight." Harold slowly closed the file. "I pray you're right, my boy. But in my experience, the quiet ones are the ones who have already won the war before you even realize the battle has started." 4 hours later, the brutal Miami sun began its descent, painting the sky in violent streaks of bruised purple and fiery orange. The dry, breathless heat of the day gave way to a balmy, fragrant evening. At the exclusive Oceanic Club on Fisher Island, a private enclave accessible only by ferry or helicopter, the elite of South Florida gathered to see and be seen. Anthony sat at a prime table on the sprawling teak terrace, overlooking the deep blue waters of the marina. A bottle of Dom Perignon chilled in a silver bucket beside him. Across the table, Lindsay was a flurry of manic energy. She was dressed in a clinging, backless scarlet gown that left little to the imagination. Her blonde hair arranged in strategic, messy waves that took 2 hours to achieve. "Okay, tilt your chin down just a little," Lindsay commanded, holding her phone high above them. "And look like fiercely in love, but also super wealthy. Like casual wealth. Perfect." The camera flashed. Lindsay immediately lowered the phone, her face dropping its bright, manufactured smile as she aggressively tapped the screen, applying filters and writing captions for her 300,000 YouTube and Instagram followers. Caption: "New beginnings with my forever. Out with the old, in with the true." No, wait, that sounds petty. How about when he finally puts a ring on the queen he deserves? Yes, posting. Anthony forced a laugh, taking a long sip of his champagne. He should have been euphoric. The dead weight of his marriage was gone. The $40 million real estate portfolio was entirely his. He had the beautiful, young fiancée. He had won the game of life. Yet a phantom itch of anxiety crawled beneath his skin. Jenna's calm, dead eyes from the boardroom kept flashing in his mind. All of it. "You got exactly what you asked for." "Anthony, look!" Lindsay gasped, suddenly dropping her phone onto the table. Her eyes, wide and greedy, were fixed on the mouth of the harbour. A shadow had fallen over the water. Gliding silently into the marina was a vessel of such staggering, immense proportions that it made the surrounding luxury yachts look like plastic bath toys. It was a 300-foot super yacht, its hull painted a sleek, matte gunmetal grey, accented by warm teak decks and glowing amber lights. A private helicopter rested on the aft helipad. The name, The Sovereign, was embossed in polished chrome on the stern. A murmur rippled through the exclusive restaurant. Even billionaires paused their conversations to gawk. "That's Zachary Vance's boat," Anthony breathed, sitting up straight, a surge of genuine awe and intimidation washing over him. Zachary Vance was a legend in the venture capital and tech infrastructure world, a reclusive, ruthless titan whose holding company, Vanguard Apex, controlled billions in assets. Vance was the kind of money that didn't just buy politicians. He bought the land the politicians built their houses on. Anthony's own firm, Caldwell Holdings, had recently secured a massive, life-changing mezzanine loan from one of Vanguard's shadow subsidiaries to keep his struggling commercial developments afloat. A desperate, highly leveraged move Anthony had kept entirely hidden from Jenna. "Zachary Vance? The tech guy who dated that supermodel?" Lindsay asked, standing up slightly to get a better view. "Oh my God, the boat is insane. Look at the upper deck. They're setting up for a private dinner." Anthony narrowed his eyes, squinting against the dying light of the sunset. On the uppermost tier of the yacht, a long dining table was set with crystal and candles. White-gloved staff moved silently, pouring wine. 2 figures sat at the table, silhouetted against the glowing sky, as the colossal yacht was expertly maneuvered into its private slip, which happened to be directly across the narrow channel from the Oceanic Club terrace. The distance between Anthony and the vessel closed to less than 100 yards. Anthony reached into his suit jacket and pulled out his reading glasses, sliding them onto his face. He focused on the upper deck. The male figure was undeniably Zachary Vance, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, radiating an aura of absolute authority, dressed in a sharp linen suit, and the woman sitting across from him, holding a crystal flute of champagne, laughing openly and freely into the evening air. Anthony's heart stopped. The blood drained from his face so rapidly he felt dizzy. It was Jenna. But it wasn't the Jenna from the boardroom. The drab beige dress was gone. She was wearing a stunning, emerald green silk gown that caught the wind, her hair cascading down her back in loose, elegant waves. She wore a diamond collar necklace that caught the ambient light, refracting it like captured stars. She looked vibrant, powerful, and dangerously beautiful. Zachary Vance leaned across the table, saying something to her. Jenna tilted her head back and laughed, a genuine musical sound that carried over the water, cutting through the ambient noise of the restaurant straight into Anthony's ears. Vance then raised his glass, clinking it against hers in a gesture of intimate celebration. "Who is that with him?" Lindsay asked, zooming in with her phone camera. "She looks—" "Wait, no way." Lindsay lowered the phone, her jaw dropping. "Anthony, is that your ex-wife?" The champagne glass in Anthony's hand trembled. The air in his lungs turned to ash. "It can't be," he choked out, his voice a pathetic, reedy whisper. But it was. Jenna turned her head slightly, her gaze sweeping across the harbour. For one terrifying, suspended second, her eyes locked dead onto Anthony's across the water. The distance was significant, but the connection was electric. Jenna didn't look away. She simply raised her champagne flute an inch higher in his direction, offered that same chilling, microscopic smile she had given him in the boardroom, and then turned her attention back to the billionaire. "What is she doing on Zachary Vance's yacht?" Lindsay demanded, her voice rising in shrill panic, sensing the sudden shift in power dynamics. "Anthony, you told me she was a nobody. You told me she didn't even understand what your company did." Anthony couldn't speak. Harold's warning echoed in his skull like a funeral toll. The lamb doesn't just walk into the slaughterhouse and hand the butcher the knife. Not unless the lamb knows the butcher is standing on a trap door. He looked down at his phone. The confirmation email from Harold, stating the divorce papers had been filed with the county clerk, sat in his inbox. It was done. He was the sole owner of Caldwell Holdings. Suddenly the weight of the company didn't feel like a crown. It felt like an anvil. And as he watched his quiet, weak ex-wife dine with the man who held the debt that could destroy him, Anthony realized with horrifying clarity that he hadn't won the divorce. He had just signed his own execution warrant 2 weeks earlier. The rhythmic, gentle rocking of the Sovereign was barely perceptible, a testament to the vessel's state-of-the-art gyroscopic stabilizers. Inside the yacht's private, mahogany-paneled library, Jenna sat on a plush, cream-colored sofa. The oppressive Miami heat was a distant memory, replaced by the cool, purified air of the billionaire's inner sanctum. She held a cup of artisan green tea, her hand steady, though her heart beat with a slow, heavy rhythm. Across from her, seated behind a massive desk carved from a single slab of petrified wood, was Zachary Vance. Up close, the tech magnate's eyes were the color of flint, sharp, unyielding, and highly analytical. Standing beside a large digital monitor was Courtney, a woman whose sharp, geometric bob and piercing gaze matched her reputation. Courtney was a former SEC investigator, turned private forensic accountant and high-level crisis manager. She was the ghost that billionaires hired when they needed to quietly gut a rogue partner. She was also Jenna's oldest, most fiercely loyal friend from college. "Show her the final schematic, Courtney," Zachary instructed, his voice a deep, gravelly rumble that commanded instant obedience. Courtney tapped a tablet. The large monitor flared to life, displaying a complex web of corporate structures, offshore accounts, and wire transfer logs. At the center of the web was Anthony's company, Caldwell Holdings. "It took 3 months of digging, Jen," Courtney said, her voice dropping into a clinical professional register. "Anthony has always been arrogant, but I didn't think he was this reckless. When you came to me suspecting he was hiding money to fund his lifestyle with that influencer, I started pulling on the threads of his personal accounts. What I found was a gaping, bleeding hole in his corporate ledger. Jenna stared at the screen, tracing the red lines connecting Caldwell Holdings to a series of shell companies in the Cayman Islands. "Explain it to me so I understand the legal reality," she said softly. "Anthony didn't just build a real estate empire, Jenna. He built a Ponzi scheme built on toxic leverage," Courtney explained, pointing to a specific cluster of data. 6 months ago, he secured a $40 million mezzanine loan from Vanguard Apex, Mr. Vance's firm, under the guise of developing the downtown commercial plaza. But he never broke ground. Instead, he funneled over $15 million of that loan through these dummy corporations, washing it and bringing it back as clean equity to pay off early investors and fund his extravagant personal expenses. He embezzled from a billionaire to keep his own sinking ship afloat. Jenna closed her eyes, a wave of profound nausea washing over her. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of supporting him, of hosting his dinners, of believing in his vision. And all along, she had been married to a fraud. A thief. When she had discovered the receipts for the diamond necklaces and the hotel stays with Lindsay, she had been heartbroken. But this was a betrayal of a different magnitude. This was criminal. "When Courtney brought this to my attention," Zachary Vance said, leaning forward and steepling his fingers, "my initial instinct was to simply crush him, to freeze his assets, call in the FBI, and let him rot in federal prison. But Courtney presented an alternative strategy, one that spares you from the fallout." Jenna opened her eyes and looked at Courtney. "If Anthony goes down while you are still married, or while you are actively fighting for half his assets in a divorce, you get caught in the blast radius," Courtney said grimly. "The feds will seize everything. The houses, the accounts, the cars. Your name is on some of those early corporate filings, Jenna. Even if you didn't know about the fraud, you'd spend the next 5 years in court defending yourself against conspiracy charges. You'd be bankrupt, ruined." "So," Jenna said, her voice dropping to a whisper, the sheer scale of the danger finally settling into her bones, "I have to walk away. I have to let him have it all." "Exactly," Zachary said, a cold smile touching the corners of his mouth. "He is currently negotiating a divorce settlement with you. He thinks he's outsmarting you. He wants to keep the company. We want you to give it to him. Completely. 100% indemnification. You sign away your rights to the company, and in doing so, you legally sever yourself from the liability. You make him the sole owner of a $40 million debt and a federal wire fraud indictment," Courtney added, her eyes gleaming with predatory anticipation. "He wants to throw you away for his new life? Fine. You hand him the anchor. The moment the divorce is finalized and the ink is dry, Mr. Vance calls in the loan. When Anthony defaults because he spent the money on his mistress and covering his tracks, the audits begin. The feds move in." Jenna looked down at her hands. The concept of revenge had never appealed to her. She was a woman of quiet dignity, raised to believe in responsibility and truth. But Anthony hadn't just broken their vows, he had jeopardized her freedom. He had treated her like a naive, disposable accessory while building a criminal enterprise in their home. "It's not just about punishment, Jenna," Zachary Vance said softly, reading her hesitation. "It's about containment. If you fight him now, he'll use the company funds, my funds, to drag the divorce out for years. If you surrender, he takes the bait immediately. You walk away clean, and I recover my assets from a criminal without dragging an innocent woman through the mud. It is a surgical strike." "What about Lindsay?" Jenna asked, the image of the young, vain girl flashing in her mind. Courtney scoffed. Lindsay is about to find out exactly what "for richer or poorer" means. When the FBI kicks down the door of the penthouse she's busy taking selfies in. The universe has a way of balancing the scales, Jen. But right now, you need to protect yourself. Jenna looked back up at the monitor. The red lines, the stolen millions, the arrogance of a man who thought he was untouchable. She thought of the years she had spent making excuses for his late nights, his sudden flashes of temper, his growing narcissism. She had been quiet for too long, but she wouldn't scream. She wouldn't argue. She would use the silence against him. "Okay," Jenna said, her voice firming, the ice returning to her pale blue eyes. "I'll do it. I'll give him everything he wants." Zachary Vance nodded slowly, in deep respect. "You are a remarkable woman, Mrs. Caldwell. And when this is over, when the dust settles, I would consider it an honor to have you join Vanguard Apex's philanthropic board. We need minds that can see the board 3 moves ahead. Present day, aboard the Sovereign." Jenna brought the crystal flute to her lips, the vintage Krug champagne bubbling perfectly on her tongue. The evening air was warm, and the view of the Miami skyline was spectacular. Across the harbor, she could see the Oceanic Club. She could see the tiny, distant figures of Anthony and Lindsay. She knew they were watching. She had planned the yacht's arrival perfectly with the captain. "He sees us," Zachary murmured, slicing into his Wagyu steak. "His lawyer just forwarded the stamped filing to my legal team. The divorce is officially on record. He has sole ownership." "Good," Jenna said smoothly. She didn't feel a surge of malicious joy, only a profound, heavy sense of justice settling into place. She had survived the storm by letting Anthony sail the ship directly into the rocks. "My forensic team has just submitted the evidence package to the U.S. Attorney's office in the Southern District," Zachary added casually, taking a sip of his wine. "They will be moving to freeze all Caldwell holding assets by 9 a.m. tomorrow, including his personal accounts." Jenna looked across the water at the man who had discarded her. She took one final look, severing the last invisible thread that bound them. "Enjoy your dinner, Anthony," Jenna whispered into the night breeze, setting her glass down. "Tomorrow, the bill comes due." The morning sun over Coral Gables was not a gentle awakening. It was an interrogation spotlight. By 8:30 a.m., the dry, suffocating heat had already baked the terracotta roof of Anthony Caldwell's 8-bedroom Mediterranean estate. Inside the master suite, the air conditioning hummed a desperate, losing battle against the glaring light pouring through the arched, undraped windows. Anthony sat on the edge of the custom California king bed, his head buried in his hands. The remnants of a brutal hangover pounded behind his eyes, but the physical pain was entirely eclipsed by a gnawing, cold terror in his gut. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Jenna, radiant and untouchable, raising a glass of vintage champagne from the deck of a billionaire's super yacht. Zachary Vance. The name echoed in his skull like a death knell. In the adjoining marble bathroom, Lindsay was entirely oblivious to the impending collapse of their universe. She had been up since 6 a.m., meticulously applying no makeup and arranging her ring lights. She was currently an hour into a YouTube live stream on her channel, Lindsay Lux, which boasted over 1 million subscribers. "So like I was saying, guys," Lindsay cooed into the camera, holding up a jade roller to her cheekbone. "When you know your worth, the universe just, aligns." Anthony and I had the most insane night at the Oceanic Club. We actually saw Zachary Vance's new super yacht pull in. Anthony does a ton of top-tier business with Vanguard Apex, so we're basically neighbors on the water now. Anthony groaned, the sound tearing from his dry throat. "Lindsay, shut up," he muttered to the empty room. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand. He had been trying to log into his offshore Cayman accounts since 4 a.m. Every single attempt was met with the same chilling red text. "Error. Account access restricted. Please contact your administrator." He dialed Harold Stanton's private number for the 6th time. It went straight to voicemail. "Babe, come say hi to the stream," Lindsay called out from the bathroom, stepping into the bedroom doorway. She was wearing a silk robe that slipped strategically off one shoulder, carrying her iPhone attached to a heavy gimbal stabilizer. "The chat is asking to see the ring again." "Not now, Lindsay. Put the damn phone away. I have a headache," Anthony snapped, his voice sharp and ragged. Lindsay pouted, turning the camera slightly so her audience could see her flawless, victimized expression. "Someone is grumpy this morning," she whispered to the lens. "But that's what happens when you're a high-powered CEO. The stress is real, guys." The digital clock on the bedside table clicked to 8:59 a.m. Anthony stood up, pacing the expanse of the Persian rug. He needed to get to the office. He needed to override the digital locks on his corporate accounts. If Vance was somehow making a move, if Jenna had actually traded the company away knowing it was a trap, he needed to wire whatever liquid cash he had left into untraceable crypto wallets. The clock clicked to 9 a.m. Outside, the heavy wrought-iron security gates of the estate did not buzz. They did not open. They were violently rammed off their hinges by a matte-black armored tactical vehicle. The sound was a deafening, metallic screech that tore through the quiet morning, followed instantly by the crunch of heavy tires on the gravel driveway. Anthony froze, his blood turning to ice. "What was that?" Lindsay gasped, her gimbal dipping. Before Anthony could answer, the heavy oak front door downstairs exploded inward with a concussive boom that rattled the crystal chandeliers. "FBI! Search warrant! Show your hands!" The authoritative, booming voices echoed up the grand, sweeping staircase. The sound of heavy combat boots thundered on the imported Italian tile. "Anthony!" Lindsay screamed, sheer panic stripping away her curated persona. She instinctively aimed her phone toward the bedroom door, the YouTube livestream still running, broadcasting raw, unfiltered reality to 30,000 live viewers. 3 federal agents in tactical gear, windbreakers emblazoned with FBI, Financial Crimes Division, burst into the master bedroom. Weapons were drawn, though pointed securely at the floor. The absolute, terrifying professionalism of their movements left no room for negotiation. "Anthony Caldwell," the lead agent demanded, stepping forward. "Yes," Anthony choked out. He was still wearing his silk pajama pants. He raised his hands, his entire body trembling violently. "What is the meaning of this? I want my lawyer. Call Harold Stanton." "You'll have plenty of time for phone calls, Mr. Caldwell," the agent said, moving swiftly to secure Anthony's wrists behind his back with heavy zip ties. The plastic bit painfully into his skin, too. "You are being placed under arrest for 3 counts of federal wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and the embezzlement of $15 million from Vanguard Apex." Wait, stop!" Lindsay shrieked, backing into the corner, holding her phone up like a shield. "You can't come in here. This is private property. I'm live streaming to 1 million people." A second agent, a stern-faced woman with her hair pulled back, stepped toward Lindsay. "Ma'am, lower the device. This is an active federal raid. Everything in this house, including that phone, is now evidence." "Evidence of what?" Lindsay cried, her voice cracking. "I didn't do anything. He bought me this phone." On the screen of Lindsay's phone, the live chat was moving so fast it was a blur of text. "OMG, is this real? FBI raid. LMAO000. Cancer Lindsay is trending RN bro. He's in pajamas. Turn it off, Lindsay, Anthony roared, humiliated beyond measure, as he was roughly guided toward the door. Turn the damn camera off. The female agent didn't wait. She smoothly closed the distance, plucked the gimbal from Lindsay's trembling hands, and tapped the screen to end the broadcast. But the damage was already done. The internet is forever, and Anthony Caldwell's meticulously crafted empire of lies had just burned to the ground in front of a live audience. By 2 p.m., the relentless Miami sun was beating down on the concrete brutalism of the Wilkie D. Ferguson Junior United States Courthouse. Inside an interrogation holding room, the air was stagnant, smelling of cheap floor wax and stale sweat. Anthony sat at a metal table, still in his silk pajama pants, though someone had mercifully handed him an oversized grey t-shirt. The heavy metal door clicked open, and Harold Stanton walked in. The seasoned lawyer looked 10 years older than he had the day before. He carried a thick leather briefcase, but he didn't bother opening it. He just stood there, staring at Anthony with a mixture of profound pity and blistering rage. "Harold, thank God," Anthony breathed, standing up quickly. "You have to get me out of here. This is a misunderstanding. Vance is trying a hostile takeover. We need to file an injunction." "Sit down, Anthony," Harold commanded, his voice deadly quiet. It wasn't a suggestion. Anthony slowly sank back into the metal chair. "There is no injunction. There is no misunderstanding," Harold said, leaning over the table, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge. "Do you have any idea the magnitude of the trap you walked into yesterday? I spent the last 5 hours reviewing the forensic audit that the U.S. attorney graciously handed me. You stole $15 million from a Vanguard Apex Shadow subsidiary." "It was a mezzanine loan," Anthony hissed defensively. "It was highly leveraged, sure, but I was going to pay it back once the downtown plaza broke ground. You funneled the money through 3 Cayman shell companies and used it to buy Lindsay a $2 million diamond ring, a fleet of leased exotic cars, and to cover the bleeding margins on your failed strip malls," Harold interrupted, his voice rising. "It's textbook wire fraud, Anthony. They have the IP addresses. They have the wire routing numbers. They have everything." "Then we fight it," Anthony pleaded, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool room. "We use the company assets to post bail. I own Caldwell Holdings outright now. Jenna signed it all over." Harold let out a humorless, dry bark of a laugh. It sounded like a cough. "Jenna, let's talk about your ex-wife, the quiet, weak woman you couldn't wait to discard." Harold finally opened his briefcase, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the metal table. It was a copy of the divorce settlement they had signed yesterday. A specific clause was highlighted in bright yellow. "I tried to warn you," Harold whispered, shaking his head. "When she gave you 100% of the equity, she also demanded 100% indemnification from all corporate liabilities, known and unknown. By signing this and filing it with the court, you legally swore that Jenna Caldwell had no knowledge of and bore no responsibility for any financial irregularities within Caldwell Holdings. You completely insulated her from federal prosecution, and the moment the ink dried on the judge's stamp this morning, Vanguard Apex called in the loan." Anthony stared at the highlighted text, the words swimming before his eyes. Jenna hadn't surrendered. She had executed a flawless, legal amputation. She cut off the infected limb right before the FBI dropped the guillotine. "She knew," Anthony whispered, the horrific realization settling in his bones. "She knew about the fraud. She went to Vance." "She didn't just go to Vance. She checkmated you," Harold said grimly. "And right now, you have bigger problems than your ex-wife." Harold pulled an iPad from his briefcase and tapped the screen. Your little girlfriend's live stream from this morning? It was ripped and re-uploaded before the feds even confiscated her phone. It's the #1 trending video on YouTube worldwide. Philip DeFranco just did a 10-minute segment on it. Drama Alert is calling it the faux billionaire bust of the century. Anthony watched in muted horror as the iPad played the chaotic footage of his arrest. He saw himself, disheveled, panicking, looking pathetically weak as the agents cuffed him. "It gets worse," Harold said, swiping to a new video. Lindsay realized her brand was imploding. The internet was accusing her of being a gold-digging accomplice to a federal crime. So, 30 minutes ago, she posted this. The video was titled, "My Truth, I Was Manipulated. Please watch." Lindsay was sitting on the floor of a hotel room, no makeup, crying hysterically without shedding any actual tears. "Hi guys," Lindsay sobbed into the camera. "I'm so traumatized right now. I had no idea Anthony was a criminal. He lied to me. He told me he was a self-made billionaire. I thought he was, legitimately successful. Look at these texts." Lindsay held up a secondary phone to the camera, showing a WhatsApp conversation. "See here? 2 months ago, I asked him how he afforded the yacht charter in Monaco, and he texted me, 'Babe, I just moved $5 million from the Vanguard Development Fund into a clean account. I'm a genius.' I didn't know what that meant. I'm just a beauty influencer. I'm a victim here." Anthony's jaw dropped. The air left his lungs. She just gave them written proof of my intent to defraud." "On a silver platter to 3 million subscribers," Harold confirmed, shutting off the iPad. "The US attorney called me 10 minutes ago, laughing. They are going to subpoena the video and use it to fast-track a grand jury indictment. Lindsay threw you under the bus to save her sponsorships. Hard karma, Anthony. It's a bitch." Anthony buried his face in his hands, letting out a long, ragged sob. He had lost the company. He had lost his freedom. He had lost the girl. And he had lost it all on a global, viral stage. 2 days later, the chaotic noise of Anthony's public downfall felt 1,000,000 miles away from the quiet, sun-drenched office space in Brickell. Jenna stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city. She wasn't wearing an emerald gown today. She was dressed in a sharp, tailored ivory pantsuit, her blonde hair cut into a sleek, business-ready lob. The sprawling, 3,000-square-foot loft was mostly empty, smelling of fresh paint and ambition. The heavy glass door clicked open, and Courtney strode in, carrying 2 iced coffees. She was followed closely by Zachary Vance. The billionaire was dressed down today in dark jeans and a cashmere polo, though his presence still commanded the room. "The lease is officially signed, Jen," Courtney said, handing her a coffee. "First year paid in full from your settlement funds. The rest is safely invested." "Thank you, Court," Jenna said, taking a sip. The iced coffee was strong and bitter, exactly what she needed. She turned to face Zachary. "Mr. Vance, thank you for coming." "Please, Jenna, it's Zachary," he said, walking slowly through the empty space, admiring the bare brick walls and the high ceilings. "I have to admit, when I offered you a seat on the Vanguard Philanthropic Board, I envisioned you operating out of our corporate tower, not starting from scratch in a raw loft." Jenna smiled softly. It was a genuine smile, reaching her icy blue eyes and warming them. "I appreciate the offer, Zachary. I truly do. But sitting in a glass tower, handing out your money, isn't going to fix what's broken in me. And it won't help the women who are exactly where I was 3 weeks ago." Zachary leaned against a structural pillar, crossing his arms. "Explain your vision to me." "When Anthony sidelined me in our marriage, I let him," Jenna said, her voice steady, carrying the weight of deep, painful introspection. I chose the comfort of the lifestyle over the responsibility of knowing the truth. I signed tax returns without reading them. I ignored the red flags because confronting them would mean destroying my comfortable world. She walked over to a folding table where she had laid out architectural blueprints and legal charters. "I'm calling it the Sovereign Initiative," Jenna explained, tapping a freshly printed document. "It's a non-profit legal and financial literacy foundation. Our target demographic is spouses in high net worth marriages who are being financially abused, kept in the dark, or unwittingly used as shields for corporate fraud. We will provide free forensic accounting audits, independent legal counsel, and education on corporate liability." Courtney grinned, a feral, proud look in her eyes. "She wants to build an army of women who know exactly where the bodies are buried before the FBI comes knocking." Zachary Vance looked at Jenna, his flinty eyes softening with profound respect. He had met countless people who, upon surviving a crisis, wanted nothing more than to hide or take a massive payout and disappear. Jenna was choosing to build a lighthouse on the exact rocks she had crashed upon. "It's brilliant," Zachary murmured, "and highly necessary. Many of my peers treat their spouses like mushrooms, kept in the dark and fed fertilizer. If you intend to do this, Vanguard Apex will seed the initiative with a $5 million grant." "No," Jenna said instantly, her tone firm. Zachary blinked, genuinely surprised. "No? If Vanguard funds it, it becomes an extension of your empire," Jenna said, holding his gaze without flinching. "People will say I only survived because a billionaire saved me. I need this to be grounded. I need it to be mine. I will accept Vanguard as a corporate partner, providing us with access to your legal networks and software. But the operational funding will come from my settlement, and whatever grants I can secure independently. I have to earn this." Zachary stared at her for a long moment, the silence stretching in the bright room. Then, a slow, deep smile spread across his face. "You are truly terrifying, Jenna Caldwell, and I mean that as the highest compliment." "She is," Courtney agreed, pulling her iPad from her tote bag. "Speaking of terrifying, have you checked the news today?" Jenna sighed, walking over to the window. "I've been trying to avoid it. Is it Lindsay?" "And Anthony," Courtney said, pulling up a YouTube clip and setting the iPad on the table. Bail was denied. Due to Lindsay's video proving he had a history of moving money offshore, the judge deemed him a severe flight risk. He's sitting in federal lockup until the trial. Meanwhile, Lindsay's sponsorships have all dropped her because she accidentally implicated herself in receiving stolen property. She's currently doing a live stream from a Motel 6 in Hialeah, begging for GoFundMe donations to pay her legal fees. Jenna looked at the iPad screen. The thumbnail showed Lindsay, red-faced and sobbing, next to a mugshot of Anthony looking hollowed out and destroyed. The view count was at 6 million and climbing. There was a time when seeing Anthony brought low would have given Jenna a twisted sense of satisfaction. But looking at the digital carnage now, she felt nothing but a heavy, somber closure. "Karma isn't a weapon, Courtney," Jenna said quietly, looking away from the screen and out toward the blazing Miami horizon. "It's just gravity. Anthony built his house in thin air. All I did was stop holding it up." She turned back to Zachary and Courtney, her posture straight, her spirit finally, truly unburdened. "Now," Jenna said, rolling up her sleeves, "let's get to work. We have a lot of people to educate." The federal detention center in downtown Miami was a brutalist monolith of concrete and reinforced glass, entirely devoid of the tropical charm the city advertised to tourists. Inside the visitors' room, the air conditioning had failed 2 days prior. The dry, stagnant heat of the Florida summer pressed against the reinforced windows, turning the claustrophobic space into an industrial oven. Anthony Caldwell sat on a bolted metal stool, picking nervously at the seams of his bright orange, state-issued jumpsuit. He was sweating profusely, his meticulously styled hair now a greasy, unkempt mess. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of weeks without sleep, haunted by the echoing clatter of iron doors and the crushing weight of his new reality. Across the scratched plexiglass divider sat not Harold Stanton, the legendary bulldog of a lawyer, but a public defender named David Miller. Miller looked exhausted, his cheap suit wrinkled, a stack of disorganized manila folders practically spilling out of his worn leather satchel. "Where is Harold?" Anthony demanded, his voice a hoarse, desperate croak through the intercom phone. "I used my one call on him yesterday. He said he was filing a motion to dismiss." Miller sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mr. Stanton formally withdrew as your counsel of record at 9 a.m. yesterday, Mr. Caldwell. Your retainer bounced. The federal asset freeze executed by Vanguard Apex's legal team was comprehensive. They seized the primary accounts, the Cayman shells, the crypto wallets, and the equity in Caldwell Holdings. You have zero liquid assets. Mr. Stanton does not work pro bono." Anthony felt a physical blow to his chest, a sickening freefall. But the house, the Brickell condo, the estate in Coral Gables is being foreclosed upon to satisfy the outstanding mortgage debt, as it was purchased with commingled, fraudulent funds, Miller recited clinically, reading from a document. And the Brickell condo was legally transferred to your ex-wife, Jenna Caldwell, prior to the asset freeze, completely insulated by the indemnification clause you signed. She owns it free and clear. Anthony dropped his forehead against the hot, smudged plexiglass. He had handed her the only life raft, thinking he was forcing her to walk the plank. "It gets worse, Anthony," Miller continued, his tone shifting from professional detachment to grim reality. "We received discovery from the U.S. Attorney today. They aren't just relying on the forensic accounting provided by Zachary Vance's team. They have a star witness, your former fiancée." Anthony snapped his head up. "Lindsay? She doesn't know anything. She's an idiot who takes pictures of her brunch." "She is an idiot who takes pictures of everything," Miller corrected him, pulling out a thick stack of printed screenshots, including WhatsApp messages where you explicitly detail moving Vanguard funds into personal accounts to avoid annoying oversight. But that's not the worst part. The U.S. Attorney offered her a deferred prosecution agreement to avoid accessory charges. In exchange, she handed over her entire iCloud backup. While Anthony sat suffocating in a federal holding cell, Lindsay was experiencing a suffocating reality of her own, a digital execution. Across town, in a sweltering, unair-conditioned motel room in Hialeah, Lindsay had set up her ring light one last time. Her subscriber count, once a proud 1.2 million, had hemorrhaged down to barely 400,000. The internet, a notoriously fickle and vicious jury, had turned her into a global punchline. Major YouTubers like Philip DeFranco and prominent commentary channels had dissected her My Truth video, exposing every lie, every timeline discrepancy, and every fake tear. Desperate, Lindsay hit the Go Live button on Instagram and YouTube simultaneously. She had stripped away her glamorous makeup, wearing a plain grey hoodie, attempting to project raw vulnerability. "Hi guys," she started, her voice trembling. "I know a lot of you are angry. I'm angry too. I was manipulated by a narcissist. I am a survivor of financial abuse. And that's why I'm launching my new initiative." She reached off camera and pulled a poorly labeled bottle of setting spray into the frame. "This is the Survivor's Glow Setting Spray," she pitched, a desperate, manic edge to her voice. A portion of the proceeds will go to helping women like me who have been lied to by powerful men. Link is in the chat. The live chat, scrolling at light speed, did not offer sympathy. It offered absolute annihilation. User_sharkbite. Women like you? You mean women who knowingly try to fence stolen Cartier watches? Drama T-spill. LMAO, drop the TMZ link in the chat, guys. Truthsayer, 99. She's literally trying to fund her legal defense with $30 tap water. Cancelled. Lindsay's eyes darted to a second monitor. A massive entertainment news outlet had just published a bombshell article, complete with security camera footage. It showed Lindsay, just 3 days after Anthony's arrest, attempting to sell the $2 million engagement ring, which had been purchased with stolen Vanguard funds, to a shady diamond broker in the Diamond District, actively violating the federal asset freeze. "No, wait, guys. That footage is out of context," Lindsay pleaded, panic completely breaking her composure. The chat became a wall of clown emojis. Then, abruptly, the stream froze. A black screen replaced Lindsay's terrified face, displaying a sterile white text box. "This broadcast has been terminated due to a violation of YouTube's terms of service regarding fraudulent solicitation and ongoing criminal enterprise." Lindsay stared at the black screen, the silence of the cheap motel room deafening. The digital world she had worshipped, the followers she had prioritized over human connection, had not just abandoned her, they had devoured her. Back in the detention center, Miller packed his briefcase. "The prosecution is offering 8 years in a federal penitentiary if you plead guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud, Anthony. If we go to trial and they play Lindsay's videos and Jenna's indemnification paperwork for the jury, the judge will give you 20. You have until Friday to decide." Miller stood up and walked away, leaving Anthony alone with the suffocating heat, the silence, and the agonizing memory of the wife who had never raised her voice, but had somehow screamed the loudest. The high-rise loft in Brickell that housed the Sovereign Initiative was a sanctuary of cool, deliberate efficiency. The relentless Miami sun beat against the UV-tinted floor-to-ceiling windows. But inside, the climate-controlled air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of fresh coffee and expensive printer ink. Jenna Caldwell sat at the head of a long, reclaimed wood conference table. 6 months had passed since she had walked out of Harold Stanton's boardroom and onto Zachary Vance's yacht. The transformation was profound. She no longer wore the armor of muted beige she had adopted during her marriage to make Anthony feel larger. Today, she wore a sharp, navy blue blazer over a crisp white silk camisole, projecting a calm, unshakable authority. Across from her sat a woman named Maria, whose hands trembled violently as she clutched a paper cup of water. Maria's husband was a prominent hedge fund manager, currently under investigation by the SEC. "He told me I was stupid," Maria whispered, a tear tracing through her expensive makeup. Whenever I asked why we had 3 different bank accounts in the Bahamas, he told me I didn't understand finance, that I just needed to worry about the charity galas. I signed whatever he put in front of me, Jenna. I'm going to go to jail, aren't I? Courtney, standing by a digital whiteboard covered in complex financial flowcharts, softened her usually piercing gaze. "Not if we move first, Maria. But we need you to be completely honest with us." Jenna leaned forward, resting her arms on the table. This was the core of her foundation, the grounded, redemptive arc she had insisted upon. She didn't offer these women empty platitudes. She offered them the brutal, liberating truth of personal responsibility. "Maria, look at me," Jenna said, her voice gentle but impossibly firm. Maria raised her eyes. "I know exactly how you feel, because for 10 years, I did the exact same thing. I liked the beautiful house. I liked the security. And deep down, I knew something was wrong with Anthony's numbers. But I chose the comfort of the bubble over the responsibility of the truth. I let my silence make me complicit. Maria blinked, surprised by the raw admission. But you beat him. Everyone knows the story. You walked away with everything. I walked away with my freedom because I finally chose to open my eyes. Jenna corrected her. I realized that ignorance is a debt that always comes due. You cannot claim innocence if you willfully put on a blindfold. We are going to help you, Maria. Courtney's team is going to audit every document you have access to. We will provide you with independent counsel to negotiate with the SEC. But you have to stop playing the victim. You have to take responsibility for your signature. The moment you own your mistakes, they can no longer be used as weapons against you. Maria took a deep, shaky breath, her posture straightening slightly. The terror in her eyes began to recede, replaced by a flickering spark of resolve. Okay, where do we start? As Courtney began walking Maria through the document request protocols, the glass door of the conference room clicked open. Zachary Vance stepped inside, carrying a thick, sealed envelope. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that moved flawlessly with his broad frame. His flinty eyes immediately found Jenna, and a warm, genuine smile transformed his stoic features. I have the offshore banking profiles your team requested from the Vanguard database, Zachary said, placing the envelope on the table. Jenna stood, offering a professional smile that held a private warmth meant only for him. Their relationship had evolved organically over the past 6 months. It hadn't been a whirlwind romance born out of trauma. It had been a slow, methodical building of trust between two equals. Zachary hadn't tried to save her. He had given her the tools to build her own empire, respecting her autonomy above all else. Thank you, Zachary. This will save Courtney weeks of subpoena battles, Jenna said. Zachary looked around the bustling office, noting the paralegals working the phones and the financial analysts poring over spreadsheets. You've built something remarkable here, Jenna. You're dismantling corrupt empires, one divorce at a time. I'm just turning the lights on, Jenna replied simply. People tend to scurry when they can't hide in the dark. Later that evening, the dry Miami heat finally broke, offering a balmy, breezy twilight. Jenna and Zachary sat on the private terrace of a quiet, unpretentious seafood restaurant in Coconut Grove, a far cry from the ostentatious glitz of the Oceanic Club where Anthony had once paraded. The U.S. Attorney's Office called today, Zachary said, swirling a glass of Cabernet. Anthony's sentencing hearing is tomorrow morning. He took the plea deal. 8 years. Jenna looked out over the dark water of the bay. She didn't feel a spike of vindication. She didn't feel a desire to gloat. She felt a profound, heavy peace. Are you going? Zachary asked, watching her face carefully. Yes, Jenna said, turning to meet his gaze. Not for him. For me. I need to close the ledger completely. I need to see the final tally. And then I never need to think of Anthony Caldwell again. Zachary reached across the table, covering her hand with his. His grip was warm and grounding. Then I'll be sitting right beside you. The federal courthouse was a chilling temple of polished marble. Jenna sat in the second row of the gallery, wearing a simple, tailored beige sheath dress, the exact dress she had worn to sign her divorce. It was a silent testament to her rebirth. Zachary Vance sat to her right, an imposing mountain of support. 2 U.S. Marshals led Anthony into the courtroom. The slick tycoon was gone, replaced by a gaunt, grey-skinned inmate in a baggy tan uniform. He shuffled to the defense table in utter defeat. The judge's gavel cracked through the hushed room. Mr. Caldwell, You engaged in calculated, systematic fraud to fund a lifestyle of excess. I sentence you to 96 months in a federal penitentiary, followed by 3 years of supervised release and court-ordered restitution of $15 million. As the marshals grabbed Anthony's arms to lead him away, he finally looked back. His hollow eyes swept the gallery and locked onto the second row. He saw Zachary Vance looking back with crushing indifference. Then he saw Jenna. She wasn't gloating. Her icy blue eyes met his with a terrifying, absolute calmness. In that stretching second, Anthony understood his true karma. He had thrown away true power, loyalty, and grace for cheap illusions. Jenna hadn't destroyed him. She had simply stepped out of the way as he destroyed himself. Anthony opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The heavy oak door closed, plunging him into the silent dark. Jenna let out a steady breath. The balance was paid. She turned to Zachary, a radiant smile breaking across her face. "Let's go. We have a foundation to run." They walked out of the chilling courtroom and pushed through the heavy glass doors into the blinding, beautiful, dry heat of the Miami afternoon, leaving the shadows of the past behind them. If Jenna's incredible journey from forced silence to unshakable sovereignty resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more epic stories of karma, revenge, and redemption. We want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic situation to find your true power? Drop your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Let's build a community of survivors. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the strongest response to betrayal is often a quiet, calculated rebuild. The universe has a way of balancing the scales, but true peace comes from taking responsibility for your own truth. Until next time, stay strong, stay sharp, and always remember, sometimes the loudest statement you can make is absolute silence.